Congratulations, you have found the Lambcast, the official podcast of the large association of movie blogs, also known as the Lamb. The Lamb is the largest collective of online movie blogs and podcasts with 2,000 members and counting. Every week on the Lambcast, various members of the Lamb community get together to talk about our favorite subject, movies. So bookmark the Lamb and follow us on social media. Be sure to join us each week to hear a lively discussion of films and movie-related talk from our members. Join the flock at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Hello, everyone. I'm Richard Kirkham. For those of you not familiar, I'm also the host of the Lambcast, and this is episode 783. The movie of the month has been a long tradition on the Lambcast, well before I came along and took over the reins. We're starting some innovations, though, on the practice, and they commence this week. The movie of the month will now be focused on a different genre or theme each month. My hope is that it'll make it easier for people with films that they want to talk about to remember to submit their choices. I'll also submit a number of options so that the community will have a minimum number of movies to vote for. The new process has just started, and biopics were the genre for September. This week's episode is the first product of those changes. There were 8 films to choose from, and one of the 3 that I submitted was the winner by just a couple of votes. So this month we're going to walk the line. Walk the Line is a 2005 American biographical drama directed by James Mangold. The screenplay written by Mangold and Gil Dennis is based on 2 autobiographies by the American singer-songwriter Johnny Cash. The film follows Cash's early life, his romance with singer June Carter, his ascent in the country music scene, and his drug addiction. It stars Joaquin Phoenix as Cash, Reese Witherspoon as Carter, Jennifer Goodwin as Cash's first wife Vivian, and Robert Patrick as Cash's father. We have 3 guests that will definitely be on the show, so while it may not be the $1 Million Quartet, you should at least get $1.50's worth of entertainment from this episode. From Pop Art, we have Howard Casner. He never shot a man in Reno to watch him die, but he did once force a guy to sit through Beasts of the Southern Wild.
Hello, I am not Johnny Cash.
Our next guest is not a boy named Sue, but a man named Matthew, and he built his portfolio one piece at a time, though it barely paid him a dime. Matthew Simpson of the Awesome Friday podcast and many other venues.
Hello, I'm Matthew Simpson. Sorry.
And from the other side of the Atlantic, about as far away from Folsom Prison as you can get in this community, Tony Cogan of Cougs Reviews and the Wicker Man podcast. He says he's been everywhere, but has he been to Jackson?
Hang on. Mackie stole my joke. I was going to do the wildcard joke as well.
All right, so Dewey Cox is probably going to come up as a discussion point during the show, which makes perfect sense. All right, we're going to get started here. The first thing that we're going to talk about is our history with the film and our general thoughts on the movie. Walk the Line was very successful financially. It won several awards. It was, Reese Witherspoon was honored with an Academy Award for Best Actress. There's a lot of stuff in this film that's worth talking about. So we're going to start by asking people when they first saw it and what they thought about it when they saw it. And Matthew, we're going to start with you. Why don't you let us in on your secrets?
So this movie came out in 2005, which is when I last saw it before I watched it last night. I think it's a fine movie. I never wanted to revisit it. I think in large part because of the reason you already brought up. I'm a huge fan of Walk Hard, and the thing that struck me last night rewatching this film is I'd forgotten just how directly Walk Hard sends this film up. But it's good. I remember at the time really liking Joaquin Phoenix as Johnny Cash and really appreciating him doing all of his own singing, and thinking that Reese Witherspoon, I remember watching and thinking like, Reese Witherspoon is going to win a bunch of awards for this. And then she did. And then rewatching it last night, I still enjoyed it. It's a good movie. I don't know why I haven't watched it in the intervening 20 years.
Well, that's okay. 20 years is a nice, period of time to go by. When you come back to it, it feels like you're seeing it again. Except, of course, that you're now watching a Mimeo copy of Dewey Cox.
Yeah, yeah, basically that's it.
Tony, how about you?
Well, really, I don't really have actually that much of a history of it. But like when it first came out in 2005, I was 10, and I was actually really just starting to get into like film fandom, and so I'd like some Oscar stuff that was going through my head at the time and starting to get into that stuff a little bit, but it wasn't really until a few years later I was actually like, properly started getting into it. But yeah, I didn't actually watch this until watching it for this episode last night. But it's one where, like, even with the intervening 20 years of music biopics, most of which follow the exact same formula as what the line, and especially in the wake of Walk Hard, it's one that I just couldn't take it seriously. Like I appreciate what I'm saying. Joaquin Phoenix is great here. I mean, his singing here is a lot better than what he did in Joker Folie à Dieu. But I like just found it just not really able to take it seriously. And granted, I think I didn't really help myself because I did it in a double bill with Walk Hard. But really think was watching What Light and then Walk Hard. It gave me a much greater appreciation for how exact the parody in Walk Hard was.
Well, I get the feeling that it would be dangerous for you to watch Young Frankenstein before you saw The Bride of Frankenstein,
I did that.
because
I
I'm not
did that.
sure you'd be
That's
able to
what
take
happened to
that
me as well.
seriously.
Although,
Oh, well,
although at the
that's
very least, when I
unfortunate.
watched Bride of Frankenstein first time, I watched it in exactly the right environment. IMAX screen, film festival, introduction by Guillermo del Toro. Uh, Sorry, like recorded one. So at least one that I appreciated, and one that I appreciate the history of that more as like a foundational horror and sci-fi text.
Well, maybe we should talk a little bit about how parody films may, in fact, destroy the things that they're parodying. That sounds like it's an issue that's going to come up during our discussion here. Howard, how about you? What's your history with the film? What did you think about it the first time you saw it?
Well, I saw it when it first came out in 2005. I found it very enjoyable. I entertaining. I think um, Joaquin Phoenix is absolutely brilliant. He has now become our best American actor. He's the American Daniel Day-Lewis, as far as I'm concerned. Um, it is in the end, though, what I and a friend have this uh, description of that of biopics when we see them, and we say, well, it's a typical what we call a typical Warner Brothers biopic. Harking back to the days of the story of Louis Pasteur and the life of Emile Zola and Marie Curie and all that. Entertaining, enjoyable, has some good acting, but not really much more than that. I've never quite understood the love for what's her name?
Reese Witherspoon?
Reese Witherspoon in the film. I liked her more this time. I think the problem I have is she has such a thankless role and that she's never a real character in her own right, but she only is there to help save the central character. And she's stuck with these incredibly over melodramatic moments toward the end. Then I'm going, oh God, how did she? I guess I should give her credit for doing stuff with things that no actor should have to do stuff with. The movie works best whenever Joaquin is singing and Reese Witherspoon is singing because that music is just glorious. But it has its cliches and it has its inaccuracies. Um, and a lot of the cliches do, especially in his relationship with his first wife, um, did stand out to me at the time.
Well, one of the things I think is true with biopics is they often have to emphasize the particular things in people's lives that make their story interesting. And it's often, some catastrophe or some turning point or some relationship. And so there's a reason that there's a cliche about the biopics because They're all looking for the hook that makes the story valuable and the thing that people care about, and those are often common themes that folks have. This is a film that's focusing, 80% of the movie is about the romance and the hesitation to participate in the romance and to follow it through for a variety of reasons. So you're going to get some of the romantic cliches, and I didn't find June Carter's, part cliche, not cliched. I didn't find it. What was the phrase that you used just a second ago? And I'm thankless.
Um,
I didn't
yeah,
find it thankless because I do think that as a character, the significance. You're right. It's a Johnny Cash biography, so we get a background of Johnny Cash. We know something about where he came from, what his family life was like. We don't get that quite as much with June Carter, but we do get moments where we do see that her life has issues in it that are important. There are things with her kids that come up. That the I think one of the most telling moments was the moment in the uh, I think it was a pharmacy or grocery store when she encounters another customer who has a very judgmental opinion of her back in the 1950s for getting divorced. And that's a tough moment to be polite in. Always want to think about what the smartass comment I would make would be. And I think the example of what her answer was probably reflected a lot on what her real character was like.
I do agree with that scene that when I saw it, I said, "Oh, how did she react that way? That must have really
Yeah.
hurt to have to just accept that." And I thought that was a very good
Yeah.
scene.
And I saw the film when it opened in 2005. I was a big Johnny Cash fan when I was a kid. I was enthusiastic about seeing the movie. I was very happy with the film. Uh, I was not blogging at the time. I didn't have a systematic way of recording movies or thinking about them. I would have probably said that this was my favorite film of 2005, and I know that there are other films out there that people uh, think are fantastic, and everybody agrees that some films from 2005 shouldn't have gotten the awards that they got. Uh, but I was I was completely flabbergasted when this film, which had been nominated for awards in other groups, the Golden Globes and for the Producers Guild, was not included in the Best Picture category for the Academy Awards that year, despite the fact that the two lead performers were both honored. So, and it just seemed a little strange that that happened. But having just had a biopic the year before that was so successful, it may have been that people were kind of a little hesitant to dive heavily into that genre again.
Well, except that there were three
Yeah, Capote
biopics nominated
is
that
the
year,
one that won for actor that year.
and
Yeah,
deservedly so, as much as I love
yeah,
Joaquin Phoenix.
yeah. Well, you've mentioned it. I think everybody has got some of it in the background of their story about the film here. The performances are obviously the thing that makes the movie stand out the most. And one of the things that I think makes the performances work so well is the fact that they actually do the music themselves. They're not lip syncing. They're not dubbed. These are their performances as actors and their voices. What did you think about in addition to the dramatic elements of the show, of the performances, which we should talk about too? I'd like to start by talking about the musical performances and especially the vocals. Uh, Tony, do you have an opinion about this? I don't know. Were you familiar with the music of
Yeah, I
Johnny
mean, I've
Cash?
got had a bit of like cultural notice thing, and I was a little bit here. Got into Johnny Cash music, not like properly obsessive, but like I was like kind of a passing familiarity with his music. And in terms of like actually be Joaquin Phoenix singing, it's a case of it needs to be on a case by case basis because sometimes like having the singer do it work, like having the actually the lip syncing work, sometimes it doesn't work. But especially now, it feels like having lip syncing works best when it's used for comedic effect, like you like in Weird Al Yankovic story when that helped make it blatantly obvious that Daniel Radcliffe wasn't singing. But then you also get like really great examples of uh the actor doing the singing sounds like uh for me always with these biopics right now the gold standard is Rocket Man and Taron Egerton singing in that was excellent but and that really added to the character of getting sense that of the performance really enhances what we're seeing. It adds to the whole context of it, and it makes you feel more like you're in the presence of the character. And that's the same kind of feeling I got with Joaquin Phoenix here. Like it sounds enough like Johnny Cash that you can easily recognize it as Cash as a character, but there you can still get little unique like vocal signs and variation that Joaquin Phoenix makes. That you still understand that it's his performance and you're getting everything that he's bringing to the role, and that's what really makes his performance work for me. Is that you can see that he's giving it his all in every part of it, and that extends to the singing. It's seeing him properly embody Johnny Cash, and that the singing is what it works for that purpose.
All right. Matthew, how about you? Were you familiar with Cash's voice, and did you think that Phoenix did a credible job?
Yep. I grew up in a house with my mother was a pretty big Johnny Cash and just very like sort of classic country band, sort of Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, all those guys. And I sort of appreciate that he was trying to sound like Cash, but not do an impression of Cash. I thought it was still very distinctly Joaquin Phoenix, which I sort of prefer, when they're not trying to, when they do it in sort of a subtle distinction, but when they try to do like an impression, it can become a bit of a caricature. And so I'm sort of glad that they didn't do that. But honestly, I think the music is the best part of this movie. Like every song's a banger, and they're all really well performed. And especially, I would say the duets. I think that is where the chemistry between Phoenix and Witherspoon shines the best. Yeah, like I watched this movie pretty late at night, and I was sort of worried about it because I'm middle aged now, and staying up late is not necessarily the best thing. But every time a song came on, I was tapping my toes. So yeah, the music is easily the best part of this film.
Howard, I know that you lived through the era of Johnny Cash and being on TV and being a regular presence in the pop culture. Did you think that Phoenix did a credible job performing the songs?
Oh yeah. I mean, I agree that it's whenever the songs come on, whenever the music comes on, that the movie really, really, really comes alive. And Joaquin Phoenix is great. I didn't know he could sing, but he can definitely sing. And they chose all the best songs Johnny Cash did in many ways. So you could probably add a large number of them still. Um, I I can't say I was a fan of Johnny Cash, but I grew up in that time period and I did like listening to him sing. He has this very distinctive voice. There's something about it. He doesn't always hit the notes, but he doesn't need to, and you don't necessarily want him to. There's something about country music that is most effective because they aren't the greatest singers. Even though they're good singers, sometimes that lack of being great singers makes them even greater. So I love the
Yeah,
music
we're
scenes and I love the
we're fortunate
songs.
auto-tune was not around in those days because that would have probably ruined a few of those performances. I do think there is something very naturalistic about a lot of country performers. I myself was a huge Johnny Cash fan. The first album I ever bought from on my own was not the Folsom Prison recording, but San Quentin, Johnny Cash at San Quentin, which came out a couple of years later and was more in line with my age at that point. And I listened to that album incessantly and followed Cash for quite a while. I fell out of, I don't want to say out of love, because I continued to enjoy country music most of my life, but there was a period of time for 4 or 5 years in the early 70s that I listened to country music more than I listened to pop music. And it wasn't until I was in college that I kind of transition to being more of a rock pop music lover than a country music lover. Um, but Cash never went away, and he was always somebody who was, in my mind and a part of the culture. And I was very happy that Phoenix did what I thought was not only a credible job, but a very convincing, uh, honest singing. Like Matthew said, it's not an impression. Cash has a distinctive enough voice that it's probably easy for impressionists to mimic, and Phoenix probably could have done that, but he doesn't try to do the exact voice of Johnny Cash. He's trying to do a representation of Cash using a what would you say, a tone that is, cash-like, and certainly with some cadences that go along with it, but still something that seems very authentic, which I thought worked really well. And I'm going to agree with everybody else here. The strongest parts of this movie are the performance sections. Both Reese Witherspoon and Joaquin Phoenix are doing a fantastic job on stage, and a couple of the sequences are just bangers. That scene that they preview at the start of the film, but they finish the film with the performance at Folsom Prison is just phenomenal, and it's staged really well. We'll talk a little bit about the filmmaking elements in a minute, but the song works really well, and you can tell that Cash was heartfelt in the way he approached that. Even though he wasn't he admittedly wasn't the kind of criminal that some of those folks were. He identified with their suffering despite the fact that they were guilty. And I like they didn't go through all of the letters that got written to him from prisons, but I like the fact that there was obviously something that people identified with and that he identified with in those performances. So I think that worked well. And Reese Witherspoon was you don't see a lot of auto harp nowadays. And I appreciate the fact that she made the effort to learn the auto harp and use it. The only time I remember the auto harp as a real instrument being used was in my music sections and when I was in elementary school. The teachers used them to do the music sections when we had music lessons in class. I think it was because it was relatively straightforward. You just pushed a few buttons to make it work and then strummed it. So any idiot teacher could operate it. I didn't mean to dismiss what Reese Witherspoon did because she's handling it a lot differently than the teachers would have in the elementary school classroom. But both Joaquin Phoenix and Witherspoon learned to play those instruments so that they could do so effectively on stage, and I thought that those presentations were very authentic. Well, we've talked a little bit about the obvious cliches that occur in the story, and that's where I wanted to head next, talking about the story in the film. Uh, it is based on two autobiographies that Johnny Cash wrote, but there is obviously supplemental material here. There were a lot of interviews that were conducted by what's his name, Gil Dennis, who was the original screenwriter on this before Mangold came along and helped him filled it out. There's some history about how the film originated that I think is kind of interesting. But you know, Cash was forthright in talking about his addiction, but this film, I think, depicts the negative effects of it a lot more honestly than probably Cash's autobiographies did. But the question, of course, is how do you turn that into a movie? And that's one of the things that makes it tough because there are cliches that go along with those sorts of things. So how did you feel about the story when it came to both the drug addiction issues and the romance that is kind of enfolded with that? Howard, you, you're a story guy. You are very careful about looking at screenplays and find flaws. What are the strengths and weaknesses in the storytelling here?
Well, when it comes to the drug addiction, I think it's pretty solid. I mean, it's not exactly accurate. He never collapsed on stage in real life. And the breakup of his first marriage was really because of the drug addiction. It wasn't because of his romance with June Carter, and they changed that. Um, but I think it's a really good uh, look at someone who becomes drug addicted and how he just loses all control over him. He's saved by the love of a good woman, which is fairly cliched, but um, I thought that was actually rather well done, if not entirely accurate.
Yeah, I can see that, and like we said that when you're dealing with a trope like drug addiction or romance, there is certainly going to be the usual stops along the way. We have moments where there's a crisis. Maybe they manufactured one on stage here, but I have no doubt that there were probably plenty of personal crises. I don't know the story behind it, but apparently at one point Johnny Cash started a forest fire, and I wonder if that had anything to do
Oh,
with his drug use. Uh, you know, it would be one of those things that happened, but that was an event that happened after the events in this story. This story largely ends in 1968 with the release of the Folsom Prison album. Um, Matthew, do you think there's anything in the story that seemed more honest or less honest than life itself?
Uh, I'm just going to agree and say that all the stuff to do with his addiction to drugs is feels very honest. Um, and I think is also very well portrayed. Like there's a if you've ever known anyone who's been addicted to that kind of drug, then there's some particular like mannerisms that can develop, and I think Joaquin Phoenix does a really good job of portraying those. Um, and just like Howard said, how self-destructive a person can become, and how desperate as well. There's moments of desperation in this film, like when there's a moment where June flushes all his pills and he becomes kind of manically desperate for them, knowing they're not available to him. And like I felt the scenes like that I thought were really great. But those are the scenes that made me think that why didn't he win the Oscar for this? Like I like Philip Seymour Hoffman was the deserved winner that year, I thought, but like this was a very close second because that is the kind of scene that those are the kinds of scenes that can again devolve into like sort of unintentional comedy instead of the sort of uh,
Well,
what am
it's
I
the
trying to say?
well, you mentioned the parody. I've seen the
Yeah,
Dewey Cox movie once, and I don't recall how authentic it was in relationship to, I don't want to say authentic, how similar it was in relationship to the drug
Well,
subplot. You
I
guys
mean the
seem
drug
like you're
subplot
fans of
in
that movie.
the
So
drug
I don't
subplot in
remember it.
Dewey Cox, the drug subplot in Walk Hard is
yeah.
ridiculous in the best
I
way.
feel like that one it takes a
Um,
bit more inspiration from Ray than Walk the Line, especially
yeah,
with
that's
Dewey
probably a
Cox in
fair
rehab.
thing to say. I'm just saying that like there's scenes like that, and I was the one that there's a movie that came out a couple years ago that I don't really want to mention the name of because it's terrible. That had Amy Adams in it, where she played a person
Mhm.
addicted to pills, and in her moments of desperation, it becomes unintentionally hilarious because it's terrible. Like the performance
Yeah.
becomes terrible, and that is a very dangerous thing in these kinds of movies. But Phoenix's performance in those moments is very authentic and very sort of pitch perfect, and those are the moments where again, I was kind of surprised that the Academy didn't award him for it. Um, so yeah,
The drug addiction scenes in Walk Hard, I think, are
Yeah.
more a parody of the movie Ray
yeah,
than this, where they start out saying you want some weed, and it says, "What does it do to you?" Absolutely nothing. And there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and they keep progressing to a bigger drug
yeah,
where they keep saying, "Oh, but it's this, and you don't have to worry about that."
yeah. You don't want any
Um,
part of this shit.
Well, like I said, I think there may have been a reaction when we were talking about why Phoenix didn't get an award, or at least the same kind of. I don't want to say he didn't get acclaim. He it was a widely acclaimed performance, but they had just given an award the year before to somebody who was portraying a pop singer going through very similar kinds of things. It sure would have felt like a repeat, which is a big surprise because Hollywood is famous for repeating itself. So I'm not sure why they would be put off by that, but that's I think what one of the things that probably changed the trajectory on this. Uh,
Well, it's interesting.
No,
It's interesting
I think
to.
just
Sorry, go ahead, Howard.
no, I think it's just that Capote is the better performance, and he just that movie just was a foregone conclusion for Best
I do
Actor almost
I
from the
do think
moment
I do
it
think there's a lot
opened.
of truth to that because there often seems to be a consensus that arrives
Yeah.
at something, and that just becomes the defining characteristic. Whenever it goes against that, that's when we're
Yeah, I
surprised.
mean, granted, I'm just going to say
Yeah,
this like on top of this. I'm in the camp that I'd have given that the award to David Chapin for Good Night, Good Luck myself, but the you remember the whole narrative of that year was it was always going to go to Philip Seymour Hoffman. His performance that just fits the narrative at that time, and felt like it was an excellent performance. And it's kind of like he was just one of the people who maybe any other year he probably would have been up there, maybe even one, but it was just the wrong year.
Well, I was thinking about it yesterday when I was trying to remember who won the award the year that Phoenix was nominated because it didn't come to mind automatically. We were driving in the car and my daughter asked me that, and I said, "Well, let me think about it." And I rattled around in my head, and at one point I said, "Well, you know, if I guess Daniel Day-Lewis, I've got a better chance of being correct than anything else." Uh, and when it came up that it was Philip Seymour Hoffman, I thought to myself, "Was that this? Did Infamous come up the same year, or was that a year later?"
I think it was around the same time.
what's
The
infamous?
Toby Jones version of Capote.
The same year they made a big deal
Yeah.
about it coming out the same year.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, the first of
That's.
two times
I
that
kind
Toby
of
Jones
thought
was
that.
in a biopic with the same subject coming out in the same year. Yeah,
Yes, he did Hitchcock as well. Yeah, Hitchcock.
Funny stuff. And it's, one of those cycles where these, they get hooked into uh, a particular genre or approach, and then you get a lot of repetition. We've had that happen before on other things, where you get, you know, asteroid
In,
movies
in France one
and
year, in France one year, they had two movies come out about Yves Saint Laurent, and both actors got nominated for the Caesar. So
an interesting conundrum that would have happened if the Toby Jones film had probably gotten a little bit more exposure, because my memory was that he was quite good in that. All right.
it was fine.
Well,
I mean,
let's
he's always quite good, so it's
yeah.
fine.
Was there anything else about the story in Walk Hard? You got me doing it now. Walk the Line that you guys wanted to talk
yeah. I
about
mean, I
before
think
we move on?
the only things I kind of appreciate about the story here is, especially compared to some of the other music biopics that feel very like sanitized or overly reverential. It's not. Perfectly willing to make Johnny Cash look like an arsehole. Like, especially compared to like something like the way the other members of Queen other than Freddie Mercury were treated in Bohemian Rhapsody. And it feels like there was some of things where they go overly reverential to get the music rights. And with the band members or musicians who are still alive, being on board as producers. But like here, I like that it doesn't go that route for Johnny Cash, and it wouldn't have felt right to go that route for Johnny Cash.
Yeah, no, I think it was pretty honest for the most part. And it's certainly not flattering to him when it comes to his domestic life. His my understanding is that.
For
Go
me,
ahead.
I just said for me that's the weakest, almost the weakest element because as I said, his wife was not unsupportive of his music career, and they turn her into this Santipa, this nag and nag and nag. And she has this one line that I hear in TV and movies where he says, "What do you want?" And she says, "I want you." And I'm going, what does that even mean? And that's usually a line that they put in when they don't really know. what can resolve the situation, and they just want the person to look bad by saying this line that has absolutely no meaning. I She doesn't necessarily want him there, but she wants him, and I'm going, well, I'm with him. What do you want?
I think that
And she
I think
doesn't
that
really know what he
I
wants.
think that
She
is
wants,
actually. I thought that scene was actually very good, and I think Jennifer Goodwin is sort of under celebrated in this film. If we're going to be honest about it. Um, but I think all she's asking for there is for him to actually be present, because I don't know how honest it is about his relationship with her, and it seems like it did make him into more of an asshole, perhaps, uh, or at least portray their relationship as more strained than it maybe was in real life. But I think all she's asking for in that moment is for him to be present, especially when he's actually around, because he's not around a lot, and that comes up. But then when he is around, he's thinking about the music and the tour and about June and about drugs. He's never really like there for her. So that was my takeaway from that scene. I found it quite impactful.
And we do get another element of the story because June has the same issue with him. Where is my friend John? I've got this thing instead, this persona that is, the rock star uh, cliche of somebody who is indulgent and sloth-like because of their drug use and indifferent because of their fame and the money that they have, and they're not acting the way they did when I fell in love with that person. So I think that by extension, a little bit, that's what Vivian's problem was. Although we probably have to infer that a little bit more because we don't get as much interaction with those characters as we do with Johnny and June.
I mean, that scene. There's a small but impactful scene when he takes Vivian to some music award show, and he's not even present with her there, even though he's brought her to the show. Like as soon as June shows up, he just basically forgets that Vivian exists. Um, I think that's sort of like their relationship in a microcosm, at least in the movie, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's all that she's asking for is like if they're going to be married, she wants to be married and have a partner and not just be married to a famous person and be alone.
All right. Uh, well, the filmmaker is James Mangold, who is a very good director and has made some films that have gotten a lot of acclaim over the years. And I was wondering if you guys saw things in the way the film was made here that are indicative of the quality of his work. I kind of like I said, the final sequence with the performance at Folsom Prison. I think that the combination of the stamping of the feet in anticipation of Johnny performing, the shots that we get of the prisoners' reactions while the song is going on, even the way they cut to the warden on occasion, that's all very effective. I like the touch at the beginning where we get a call back. I know that's the big cliche moment that I remember from the Dewey Cox thing was that there's a lot of lingering over the saw
Johnny Cash
and
got
the
think about his
accident that
entire
took
life
his
before he
brother.
goes on stage.
Yeah. So it's like but I kind of like the fact that we get a callback to that and that's what's going on. He's thinking about all those kinds of things and I like the way that's told. There's the moment it's probably a pretty obvious transition moment, but the moment that we go from the child playing young JR to Joaquin Phoenix playing the part, comes from laying across the bed, and it's just a nice smooth moment that probably occurs in 1,000 films, but it's well constructed. It does exactly what it's supposed to do, and it introduces us to the main star of the film, I think, pretty effectively. I'm sure that there were other things that happened on screen that were probably worth mentioning from the way the movie is shot, but I want to give you guys a chance to talk about those things as well.
well, I think he's a very good director. I don't. He's become a very pop culture director. He started out doing more independent type films with Heavy and Copland and Girl Interrupted, and then suddenly burst into being very pop culture, being very mainstream, being very uh, safe in many ways. Though I would have to say that Logan is both pop culture uh, and sort of an independent feel to it. So I think he's a very good director. He is a very good director of pop culture films. I'm not sure he, in the end, is going to be remembered for anything much more than that. But he makes very entertaining movies. You can't argue with that. And his filming of the music scenes are really great. There's not a lot he can do about the more melodramatic moments that comes from the screenplay, but uh, yeah, I think he does a very good job. And you can look at his list of movies and see that, yeah, he makes very
I feel like
entertaining
for me
movies.
with James Mangold, he's probably his best like style to work with is with westerns, like with Three Tenths of Humor and to an extent Logan. It's more of a western than a superhero film, and I feel like that's the style that he works best in. He does like do a good job with like biopics, and when he really gets into the more energetic side of the biopics, that's when his directorial style works really well. Like the music, the performance sequences in this and the Complete Unknown or the race scenes in Le Mans 66, or well, that's how it's called in the UK, for Ferrari everywhere else. But but in the more melodramatic scenes, it does feel like it's a bit more like generic. But again, part of that could just be Work Hard parodied that his style with Jake Kanson's direction so effectively that I really don't really take it seriously anymore. And also because partly is for me, I like the biopics like do something a bit more wild and different with their presentation. Like for example, the one like for one of me, I've already said how much I love Rocket Man and being presented as this big theatrical musical, or Better Man with doing Robbie Williams as a CGI monkey. And every film could be this. Every biopic could be better if they replaced the lead with a CGI monkey. But yeah, but James Mangold's direction in everything outside of the music, it just felt pretty flat to me.
I think it's probably fair to say that James Mangold is really good with actors, and I think he's very solid with how he shoots things, how things are blocked, and how the camera moves.
Yeah, I feel like the
He
best way to obviously like a
uh,
journeyman director.
yeah, like
Yeah,
he's very solid, right? Like there's nothing wrong with anything he does, and that's sort of an unfair way to even say it. He's a very solid director. Everything he does is very competently made, but not a lot of it is very flashy. Um, and I feel like I don't know that I necessarily 100% agree with what Howard said about him not being remembered. But what I do think is that for him to be remembered, he's probably going to need another like 10 years of these kinds of movies to be like one of those guys where people are like, oh yeah, James Mangold, he made a ton of really solid movies, you know? Because if you look at his list of movies, like even the ones that I'm not a huge fan of are all really well made. Like again, not flashy, um, but all like very solid. And I think there's merit in that. I think that if a great movie has three good scenes and no bad ones, then that describes a lot of his movies,
yeah.
right? And he's not necessarily going for big and interesting shots, but what he is doing going for is authentic performance, and I think he almost always gets that. Um, and I think that's sort of an underrated thing today, where we're always looking for like the next big shot and the next big set piece and the next big interesting camera movement. And a lot of his focus seems to be more on, let's turn Timothy Chalamet into Bob Dylan authentically. Let's turn Joaquin Phoenix into Johnny Cash authentically. And I think that he achieves that basically every time.
Well, I liked a lot of the choices that were made in filming the performance scenes. I mentioned the Folsom Prison scene, but some of the Vegas showroom scenes, they look really much like they are from that time period, and I think there may be film stock or camera work that really reflects the same kinds of styles that existed in that time period. That it felt very authentic to me watching it, having grown up in that era, basically having seen performances like that on television, and it just looked familiar, even though it's being staged for the film. It felt, like I said, very authentic. And I think you guys have the right take on this. He is a very competent filmmaker who doesn't have a lot of flash in what he's doing, but he is focused on story and performance, and it's there to service the story more than it is to aggrandize his abilities. Well, does anybody have any other thoughts about the film that they wanted to talk about? I have one other thing that I wanted to mention, but I'll save that for the very end. But I want to give you a
I
chance.
want to mention,
Go ahead.
I want to mention, I really noticed this time how brilliant the costumes and hair and makeup were, especially those cat glasses. I think that's what they were
Yep.
called, and Beaufont hairdos. But the costumes, it's very difficult to make costumes from a modern day period that feel real but aren't exaggerated, that really feel like they're like off the rack at the corner store, or they're just what people wear every day at the time. They're very good but understated. And it was nominated for best costumes. And this time around, I kept saying, "Oh yeah, those costumes and that hair and makeup, they're just great."
I would agree. That's a good call out, actually. It does feel, again, very authentic. Everything they're wearing and everything all the look looks feels very authentic in a great way. Um, Kind of interesting that Memoirs of a Geisha beat it for best costume design that year. Um,
Well, it was much more flashy, let's face it.
yeah, I mean the same thing we were just talking about, right? Like this is not that film is necessarily inauthentic, but this one is a lot less flashy, like a lot less big, you know. My hot take about the Academy Awards is that they often nominate the most of things, not the best of things. If
I
that
mean, that's the only reason.
makes sense.
That's the only reason that makes sense for Bohemian Rhapsody winning Best Editing.
That is accurate. Yeah.
Well, anything else that you guys wanted to talk about before I get to my final bit? Okay, the last thing that I want to add is that this has maybe my favorite movie poster in my entire collection of movie posters. I've got about 300 or 400 movie posters that I've purchased over the years. I in the later years I've gotten reproductions, but for the most part, when I bought the posters originally, it was when the film was out and they were authentic posters. The graphic design on Walk the Line with the image of looking at Johnny Cash from behind with the guitar down at his side, with the colors that are used in the poster, is one of my favorite images. And I had it hanging over my fireplace for a decade after this movie came out. I love that poster so much. I still have it, but I don't have it displayed right now. And I just think it's one of the best examples of how a movie can sell an idea and an emotion with a with an image so effectively.
Yeah, I agree with that.
I
That
mean, it is
poster
an excellent
is brilliant.
poster.
Even when as somebody who only watched a film for the first time recently, it did always think of mine. Just I it's mainly because of that poster. That's always like been something that's just been in my head since I first saw it.
That
Well,
poster makes a great phone background, by the way. Like
oh,
it's a very striking image. Um, it's actually this is a maybe the unfairest thing to say, but it's one of the few things about the movie that Walk Hard didn't parody that I wish it did. Because I think a poster of Dewey Cox in this style would be amazing.
well, good, because you guys seem to have been, influenced by Dewey Cox in evaluating the film. At
Yeah.
least Tony was for sure. And I would hate to have the poster have the same effect on this particular poster, but I'm glad that you guys generally agree with my view of it. I just think, like I said, that it's a spectacular piece of work, and I have never found the graphic artist that it's attributable to. It's a studio that gets credit for it. And I'm not sure if there's individuals who contributed to it more than any others. I don't want to shortchange any experts. So if anybody out there knows, be happy to put it in the notes if you contact me.
I would
Oh,
say that, like, I think that we're talking about Walk Hard a lot, and I think that is at this point kind of inevitable because Walk Hard is such a direct parody of this movie, but it's also because, like, Walk Hard is also a parody of every music biopic made to this point. It feels like
the big main thing that anyone making a music biopic now should do is watch Walk Hard and see if it feels like Walk Hard at any point, make some changes, because otherwise it won't be taken seriously.
Well, like there's like a number of cliches that you need to like not hit.
Yeah, I mean, that was brilliant.
And I think Howard said at the start.
Yeah.
Sorry, Howard said at the start that his he has a phrase that he uses that it was like I think you said it was like a typical Warner Brothers biopic, which I think is a great line. I have a phrase that I use where when I watch a music biopic in particular, I end up saying, "Yeah, that walked pretty hard," because it's not just this movie that Walk Hard satirizes. Like this movie and Ray hit many of the same points. Even A Complete Unknown, like last year, which was also James Mangold, walked pretty hard. It helps that the songs are all bangers in all these movies, but like there seems to be like a formula, and that Walk Hard parodied that formula so perfectly that it makes a lot of movies, not just this one, but like a lot of movies, kind of hard to take seriously once you've seen it. So I just wanted to. I don't really know exactly where I'm going with this, but just to say that, like, I don't want to. It's this movie's they're inextricably linked, but I'd just like to point out that, like, just because Walk Hard is so pitch perfect and because it satirizes this whole genre, not just this movie. Like, if we were talking about A Complete Unknown today, I would also be bringing up Walk Hard. Just is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about this kind of formula, that was a really great video essay put up by Patrick H. Williams that I also watched in preparation for recording this today, and he just lays out all the beats, and even when it's based on real history, it's all a lot of them are presented in the same order, with the same kind of tone, and like so there's no real variation to it. And between like stuff like that, when you start videos like that, which you guys start noticing for me, and then again ones like Walk Hard, or even that, or recently Weird Al Yankovic story, it's stuff like that it goes kind of like stop me from taking the more traditional music biopics seriously, and that's why really it's when they take a bit more risk or do something different that really either done in a style that best benefits the musician, or like ones that focus on more specific periods that means it doesn't really gets like the time going through the full career to fully go the Walk Hard route. That those are like the music biopics or just biopics in general that really like hit for me now.
Well, I have no doubt that in some production meeting, somebody is probably thinking about all those things and mentions it in their conversations as they're putting these biopics together. They're saying, well, let's not walk too hard. Let's walk gently in this area so that we don't come across cliche. But sometimes the story is the story, and there's a reason that the cliches exist. And the fact that they jump out is just coincidental.
I mean, it's the thing about cliches; they come up all the time.
Yeah. Well, speaking of cliches, let me say that it's a cliche here that we have to finish our discussion of Walk the Line and move on with our exit question in just a moment. But first, we're going to hear from a fellow Lamb Podcasting Network show, and then we'll be back to talk about some other biopics that might exist someday.
Hey, Nick.
Hey, Bubba Weed.
Hey, did you know the song Sledgehammer by Peter Gabriel, he was actually talking about his penis?
What? The whole time?
Yeah, it's... he was talking about having sex. And did you know that the song Blinding Lights by The Weeknd was actually about driving under the influence?
Under the influence? I figured driving because of the lights, but under the influence as well?
And did you know that Weapon of Choice was actually about Dune?
No. Now I know you're lying.
could be. And at Lyrical Innuendo, we actually discuss these songs and more and decide if they are really about sex, drugs, or if they're just rock and roll. And you can find the newest episodes on Spotify and everything else at rabbitholepodcasts.com.
We're back, and it's time for the exit question of the week. The subject of this month's movie of the month was a biopic, and that's kind of where I went with the obvious question for the exit question this week. Who do you think would be a good subject for a biopic? Either a fresh subject that hasn't been covered before, or definitely a better version of a biopic than the ones that have been done in the past. And I know that Tony has a long litany of English aristocracy and royalty that he can pick from. So I'm going to ask him to go first and hopefully limit it to, just one line of
Well,
families.
we've got English aristocracy and royalty, but for me, I'm going for the English explorer. Not English. The British explorers route. So, like a era of history that I'm fascinated by is like what's called the heroic age of polar exploration. So the of Georgian, Victorian, Edwardian era, like going for like the 1700s up to like Shackleton and Scott. And there are a lot of really interesting figures that you could do biopics on. There's some that we've found ones about already. So we've had ones about Roald Amundsen. There's some like great TV series done up with The Terror, focusing on the Franklin expedition, and the Shackleton miniseries with Kenneth Branagh, talking about his expedition. Even some like older documentaries like The Great White Silence, which is a brilliant like documentary on Scott's expedition, and I recommend that. But I want to like focus on a figure that I don't think has got as much attention as it really should have, and part of it is because of a deliberate smear campaign. And the person I think could do a really good subject for a biopic is Dr. John Ray. He's a more obscure figure, but a very important one in the history of polarization, being that he was the first person to find the clues of what happened to the Franklin expedition, which famously it went to discover the final link of the Northwest and sail through the Northwest Passage, going through the Arctic and find out what happened and find out navigable routes through that area. But it's famously the ships got stuck in the ice. The crews abandoned the ship and had to march hundreds of miles to Canada, and all the sailors on that journey died on the journey. And for years, there was no clue about them, no indication of what happened to them, no messages, nothing. And Ray's efforts were like the first real clue that they got. There's some really interesting stuff with his journeys, particularly as he adopted the local Netzlich customs of the gear he took, the clothing he wore, and used that as a bit of a good contrast with the more traditional like woolen equipment and the heavy man hauling that was promoted by the British Navy as a sign of like the toughness and arduousness, wanting that more arduous journey. In some sense, a way to establish character, and you can get that show of the culture clash and adoption of local customs. You can really add in some more horror and suspenseful elements with how like empty the polar environment is, and the mystery of find out what happened to the Franklin expedition crew. And then you also look into like cultural attitudes back in Britain, as Ray's expedition found. One of the things, the evidence he found, was that the crew of the Franklin expedition ended up resorting to cannibalism. Even the food that the Franklin expedition had was either rotten, their tins were filled with like bones, rocks, and botulism when they were lucky.
Is that the basis of his being discredited because he revealed something that was unflattering?
So he basically wrote two reports for the British Admiralty. One for public distribution, which was more of a sanitized version, and one which was putting the full details of what he found. The one which included the cannibalism. The cannibalism was one that got released, whether like on purpose is still a bit of an unknown. And it was seen as a massive insult to the character of the crew. That there's no way that an Englishman would even think of resorting to cannibalism. It's not in the English character. And I know that there were members of the Franklin crew that were like Irish and Scottish Welsh, but it's that kind of like traditional stiff up like English values that they emphasize. And there was a smear campaign against Ray and the Netzlet population led by Lady Franklin and Charles Dickens that really destroyed his reputation. He didn't get the credit he deserved for finding links. He didn't get really get the rewards or the attention they gave. It was only really in like 2014 that like the MP for the Orkneys really made an effort to get him properly recognised for his actions. And I think stuff like that, the culture clash, the smear campaign, even being in the other historical figures, I think you can get a really great biopic from those subjects.
Well, it sounds interesting. Everything that you described to me sounds like it's the kind of, fodder that you would want to have in a biopic. You've got a misunderstood central character. You've got a dramatic story to follow through. It's almost like a
Yeah.
procedural investigating it. You've got the cultural issues that come into play, and of course that there are going to be antagonists along the way. So it would certainly be an interesting story to tell. I'm not familiar with it at all, but I'd pay
And I
money to
mean, if
see
you
it
want to
right
like
now.
initial starting
So.
point for that era of history, like check out the TV series of Terror. Even with the Demon Bear, it has in it. It's a remarkably accurate depiction of what happened on the Franken expedition. Again, Demon Bear notwithstanding.
Well, very good. Thank you for starting us off. Howard, did you have an inspiration for a potential biopic?
Well, not exactly a biopic, but it's something I actually would have loved to have done a long time ago or seen a long time ago. And someone finally sort of started doing it when they did the feud with Betty Davis and Joan Crawford. I've always wanted to make a TV series that traces the creation of either All About Eve or Casablanca. Both of them start, of course, before the final film even started. All About Eve starts in the 1930s with this German stage actress Elizabeth Bergner, who was uh, was fooled by a young fan who tried to do much of the same thing that Eve did in the movie, and then it just proceeded on. And Casablanca starts with an unproduced play called Everybody Comes to Rick's. So I've always wanted that. And then when I saw they're doing it with Feud, I said, oh, they need to do more of those. So those are the two I would love.
Well, I think all of the film fans on the Lamb would probably appreciate either of those. Let's face it, we like the movie business and we're interested in how films are made and the process. There have been books written about both of these subjects. I know that that's true because I've read a couple of books on each of them, and they are fascinating stories with lots of characters, lots of colorful characters. So I think you could tell a pretty good story there. And like you said, maybe as a what they used to call a mini series, 3 or 4
Right.
nights covering it, and let's call it a day at that point. Nowadays, I guess it would be a limited series on a streaming service.
Right.
It seems like it would be a natural for a outlet like TCM to do something like that. But but
Right.
I don't think they've produced any original films, just some productions on
They did do
documentary
one
things.
original
Oh,
series.
what was yeah, because it was
They
a radio thing, right? Wasn't it? It was
it was based around a radio
right.
program from the 1930s or 40s or
Yeah, and
something. I
I
never
don't think
saw any of
I
it,
don't think it
but
succeeded, which is maybe why they haven't continued to follow in that
yeah.
process. Well, very good. Matthew, have you got somebody that you think would be the suitable subject for a biopic or something along those lines?
Yeah, I have two actually. The first one, in keeping a theme with the music biopic, would be the Canadian uh, icon Gord Downie. He's the lead singer of the Tragically Hip, which is perhaps the most Canadian of bands outside of Rush. Um, and he just led a really interesting life. He's a singer and a poet. He and an activist. He's very involved in Indigenous rights in Canada, Indigenous reconciliation in Canada. And he's just an interesting, heartfelt guy. And I feel like if you're going to do a music biopic about iconic singers, he's a pretty natural choice. And the other one would be the author Farley Mowat, who's also Canadian, because that's the way I roll. And he's a super interesting guy. He wrote a lot of great books through the 70s and 80s, well, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, many of which have been made into films. But he also served in the military during World War II and was an intelligence officer and was instrumental in some of the operations that liberated the Netherlands, and he invaded Sicily. And it's interesting, actually, there's a couple of movies you can already watch, at least one called Never Cry Wolf, which was made in the 70s based on one of his books, which was, it's billed as subjective nonfiction rather than autobiography, but it's very interesting. If you want to get a better picture of who he is, it's an interesting film to watch and book to read.
Very good. You've got I don't want to say you're being a homer, but that's okay. You can do that. I'm going to be a bit of a homer as well. So uh, we find inspiration where we live, what we see around us on a regular basis. So that makes perfect sense. Um, I have two as well. The first one is the one that probably would be most interesting to people who listen to this show, and that's Orson Welles. Orson Welles was one of the geniuses of the early age of gold, the golden age of cinema, and his career never sustained itself after his first initial successes. He did produce a lot of things afterwards that were worthy, but he fell into, I don't want to say maybe disrepair. The famous quote that I remember from him is, "Gluttony is not a secret vice." It's not one of those things that you hide. And he lived big, he lived large, he had interesting things that happened in his life. But I think an early biopic focusing on his life around the time of the famous War of the Worlds broadcast, and then the start of Citizen Kane, and up to the butchering of the Magnificent Ambersons would probably be a good time period to cover in his career. And he's been depicted on film a couple of times. Uh, was it Vincent D'Onofrio who
Well,
played him
Vincent
in
D'Onofrio
Ed
was the
Wood? I'm trying
body.
to remember.
Maurice LaMarche was the voice.
Yes.
Okay, so we had a different voice. Uh, so we've had that image on film, and that's kind of the a later era Wells, and we need somebody who's earlier because he was quite the dashing figure
Yeah, I mean,
in his youth, and I think that
yeah,
that
I mean,
would be
Richard, I talked
effective.
about the early ones. Have you seen Me and Dawson Wells, the one with Christian Mackay playing him? Was he that was a
Yeah.
brilliant performance as Wells, and if you've not seen it, I highly recommend that one.
Okay,
I
I think what's more amazing about me and Orson Welles is they found someone who could do Joseph Cotton's voice perfectly, you know. But we also have Mank, which was about the making of Citizen Kane, though told from Mankiewicz's point of view.
yeah,
But yeah, he's quite. I don't know if you've heard, but there are some people who are going to try to use AI to recreate the
yeah, I
original
saw that
ending
story,
to the Magnificent Emersons.
sounds
and
like a
there,
terrible idea.
yeah, that's that's the world we live in. It's the future is going to be reviving the past using artificial intelligence. Uh, I'm scared about what it's going to do to movies in the future, but I'm not unwilling to watch the experiment happen. I just don't know that I want it to succeed. Um, the other
Yeah,
person, the other person I thought deserves a good biopic for, and is somebody who is clearly interesting, fascinating, and compelling, is Theodore Roosevelt, who lived an incredible life before he became president of the United States. He is probably one of the most interesting human beings you'll ever encounter. He was a naturalist, a cowboy, an author, a scientist. He was a philanthropist. He had his finger in a thousand different pies, and he was very good in all of them. And I think that there's a great story to be told of his time uh, between his youth and when he became uh, politically significant, before the Spanish American War. There's a whole set of interludes that take place in the Dakotas that would be fascinating. He literally had gunfights with people, and he was an explorer and a naturalist, and he wrote things that were important scientifically. He's when he's been portrayed on screen, it's always a bigger than life figure, which is what he was, but it's almost a caricature instead of an accurate portrait. And that's because people remember the big grin and teeth and the pinched glasses and his outsized personality. And they're not always as familiar with the things that made up his life. And I think it would be fascinating if there's, I'm trying to remember, is it Edward Morris who did the three books on Teddy Roosevelt?
Well, you may be happy to know that Martin Scorsese is in pre-production with Leonardo DiCaprio. But
Yeah, they've been talking about doing this for 15 years, and I'm still waiting for it to happen.
yeah, so
It would probably be the first book that I would look forward to the most
yeah.
because
Well, what are you going to do? Robin Williams and Brian Keith are both
yeah.
dead, so trying to find someone to play him.
I'm
There
sure
was
there's
a
somebody out there who's
I mean, I think,
capable.
there was a mini series about him in
Yeah.
the '90s, right? Like about his time with the Rough Riders.
I'm not familiar, but I'm not doubting you.
I think they're. Hang on, let me just.
yeah, I mean, definitely agree with like the Bruce Willis.
Indian.
There's a 1997 miniseries, yeah, with Tom Berenger playing Teddy Roosevelt about his time with the Rough Riders.
Oh, that sounds like it would be quite interesting. And Berenger sounds like he'd be at that period about the right kind of casting. That's
Yeah, I
interesting.
remember. I remember watching this like in the '90s when I would have been 16 that year, 17 that year, 16 that year. And I remember being like, "Oh, that's an interesting story," but I don't remember any detail about it.
What
So
you have the title?
it's called Rough Riders.
Yeah, I
Rough
mean,
Riders. Okay, because I'm going to look for it. I'm sure it's probably available somewhere on
yeah,
Tubi
I
or
mean, we definitely
somewhere.
agree. Like we've seen, like
Yeah, somewhere probably.
Roosevelt's appeared as like more large than life character again. Most of them in films pictures I get from Robin Williams' portrayal, like to the museum, and it was when you got the Roosevelt ex machina in Newsies.
All right. Well, we want to give everybody a chance. I want to thank everybody for showing up this week. I appreciate it. We didn't have the full cast, but we had the cast that we really want. And I want to give you a chance to share what it is that you're working on that you think others might appreciate knowing about. So, Tony, let's start with you. Have you got some project or some product that you think people would appreciate seeing, hearing,
So
reading
yeah, so
about?
do my views on my site, cooksreviews.wordpress.com. It's going to be a few weeks, but in October, going to be once again doing my trip to the London Film Festival. So, don't know what I'm going to be seeing yet. Tickets only go on sale for me on Tuesdays at time of recording, so not don't know what time yet, but it's going to be some interesting stuff I get from that. Uh, you can still find the podcasted on the Wicker Man. Any podcast found, just search Wicker Man podcast. And most recently, I recorded an episode of Bob Wheat's podcast Anthological, talking about the Fantasia segment, The Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Very nice. Howard, how about you? What's going on pop art?
Nothing really new. The most recent one is still the one with Andy Golding on Parent Trap. Parent Trap. Oh, that's a totally different
Parenthood.
movie. Parenthood. Maybe I should do Parent Trap sometime. Parenthood and the Royal Tenenbaums, which are both studies of parents. And then the next one, I think we're recording on Saturday, will be with the 80s montage people, Anna Kaiser and Derek Dankey, where we're doing Close Encounters of the Third Kind and two versions of War of the Worlds, the one from 1950s and the other one from 2005.
Oh, that would be a
Well,
good episode. I look forward to that.
yes, good stuff. Matthew, I know you're writing all over the place. Do you have something that we should be looking for in particular?
No, I mean, I write all over the place. So the easiest way to catch up with me is just to go to my personal portfolio site, which is stretched.ca. At the moment, TIFF is in full swing, and I'm not in Toronto, but I'm helping cover for a couple of sites via remote screeners. So there'll be a bunch of TIFF writing in the coming week. And there's a bunch of writing from Fantasia Festival out of Montreal last month, Tribeca, and a number of new releases. I've been pretty busy actually, so there's a lot of writing on the site for the summer.
Well, that's nice. You've got things to keep you busy. That's what you want.
Yeah.
All right. On my site, I'm going to be putting up a post in the next day or two about the presentation that I went to last week of Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 presented by Robert Rodriguez, which was a lot of fun. It was the closing night for the Paramount Summer Classic Film Series. I had a busy week last week catching up with all those things. We had a double feature of You've Got Mail and Empire Records, Rocky Horror Picture Show, uh, and the Kill Bill films are the ones that were at the Paramount. But I also went to a screening of The Outsiders and of Ghostbusters. We had a Ghostbusters movie party, and if you've not been to the Alamo Draft House and don't know what a movie party is, I would encourage you to go as long as you're seeing a film that you already know, not one that you're seeing for the first time, because that would not make as much sense. The movie parties are a little bit different experience, a lot of fun, and they're interactive. So they try to create a Rocky Horror kind of environment. It's not always successful, but the one with Ghostbusters was pretty good. So we had a good time there. All right, once again, I want to thank everybody for showing up this week. I think that we had a pretty good subject to talk about. I'm sorry that the Dewey Cox movie has spoiled it for some of you, but that's okay. The story is still the same, and the legacy I think is pretty sound. And make sure that you make that poster your phone background. Have a good week, everybody. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Lambcast. If you have an idea for a show or would like to join us on the Lambcast, contact us at largeassmovieblogs.com.
Find us on Facebook, just search for Lambcast, or on X, formerly Twitter, at Lambcast. And you can find us on YouTube as well. The Lamb site can be found at largeassmovieblogs.com. We'd also love it if you would leave a review on iTunes.
Ha 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 ha